Housing Minister Sean Fraser there this week on his government's latest move to spur housing development. Today, the mayor of Canada's largest city was on the Hill lobbying political leaders, calling for a doubling of refugee housing funds and nearly $500 million from the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund. Was the government receptive to the mayor's demands? Olivia Chow, the mayor of Toronto, is with us now in studio to talk about that. Hi, Mayor. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
Good afternoon.
I wanted to start off just on the concept of this New Deal, because I watched with great interest your meeting with Premier Ford, for example, and this working group you've struck, to talk about a different relationship between the province and the city. What does a New Deal with the federal government look like from your perspective?
It's a New Deal for people. It's actually been requested for over a decade. Other mayors, not just from Toronto, all the big cities across Canada from coast to coast to coast have been saying that these municipalities are only relying on property tax. But housing, childcare, police, nursing homes, you name it, especially public transit. So we're losing a lot of productivity if we are not having good public transit. And the city, in this case, City of Toronto, are in a big deficit situation, budget deficit of $1.5 billion. And we need to build affordable housing. We need to have better public transit, which is why we said that we need to have a New Deal for people.
So does a New Deal mean, in layman's terms, more money from the federal government to assist Toronto in addressing that budget shortfall and building affordable, like all of that stuff? Does the bottom line mean you're hoping for more transfers from the federal government?
It's about being stable, sustainable, long-term. If not, each year, it's coming back, asking for more. You can't plan a subway line or buy subway cars because it takes 3 or 4 years. You can't build housing unless you lock down some funding, predictable funding, for 3, 5, 10 years, right? So it's both the operating dollars and the capital dollars that we need. So stable, predictable funding, like the gas tax, which is already flowing, but not enough. There's been requests for sales tax, transfer 1 or 2 cents of the existing sales tax to municipalities, not just Toronto, because when you see homeless sleeping on the street in Toronto, you're seeing the same thing in Halifax, right? So whether it's Toronto mayor like myself or Mike Savage, which is Halifax mayor, we're all saying the same thing.
So would you rather see, for example, in what you talked about with the sales tax, would you rather see a transfer of 1 or 2 points of the tax that already exists to cities?
Yes.
Or would you, because you've also talked, and actually the committee voted on introducing your own, an additional sales tax in Toronto.
But that's up to the provincial government.
But are you going to do both? I'm asking on behalf of people who are in Toronto, who I imagine already feel like they're under the weight of a lot of taxes.
No, we're saying we know there's an economic, people are having problem affording things. There's an affordability question, right? So right now what we've been doing is to have people that buy very luxury homes to pay a little bit more through a mansion tax. People in the middle of a housing crisis, speculators that leave their homes or apartments vacant, well, they pay a bit more, right? 3% more. And so those things only hit 2 or 3% of the population, people that have a lot of money. But we're talking about some structural problems because we don't want, winter is coming. We're seeing refugees starting to sleep on the street again. So we need to find housing for them. And building housing takes 3 or 4 years, at least, the fastest. At the meantime, we can buy existing building, we can convert them into affordable housing, we could have rent supplement so that we can take people out of shelters and put them in decent homes, because we have 10,000 people living in shelters.
And I do have a question about the asylum seekers and the shelter situation in a moment. I just want to make sure I'm clear on behalf of Torontonians listening. If you are to get some of the sales tax transferred from the federal government, does that mean you will not pursue an additional sales tax just for the city of Toronto?
No, we wouldn't if we are getting, because the 10 years ago, the 1 cent solution was 1 cent of the existing sales tax transferred from municipality. Mr. Harper, the Prime Minister of the time, cut GST by 2%, but didn't transfer the funds to municipalities. So we're back asking for the same thing, actually.
Let me ask you, what was the level of receptiveness to what you asked from the federal government? And I ask because, well, A, because you know, we want to know what they're saying to you, but second, because I recall a few weeks ago when you were talking about new deals and the budget shortfall Toronto faces, the Minister of Finance was very specific in her comments that the federal government has done a lot for cities. Look to the province, they have surpluses. I know you've already met with the province, but are they giving you the same message, or do they seem more receptive to big structural changes like the ones you're talking about?
Well, the provincial government in Ontario has now decided to work with us because they acknowledge we have a structural problem, and they're receptive. So we have a working table now, and we'll report out in November what are some of our solutions. So it's a very good step because it's a beginning of a dialogue. What I'm here to say to the federal government, work with us. We deliver the service. You have the funds. Whichever way you want to deliver it, we need it now.
And do you feel like they will? Do you feel like there's a receptiveness to that?
I think they're listening very intently. They do understand there's a housing crisis. We're seeing it on the streets. We're hearing renters saying they're anxious, they're being evicted, they can't pay rent, and you look at the record, people using food banks, a third of them are children. 1 out of 3 are kids going to food bank because the housing cost is so high. So we have to work together to make transit better, to have better housing. Those are things that touch people's lives every day.
My understanding is that 50%, you mentioned the shelters just before I let you go, Mayor, 50%
refugees.
of the people entering the shelter system right now are refugees. I know the federal government has already injected emergency funding of around $97 million. My understanding is your ask was for essentially double that. Are they prepared to do that? Have they told you that they are? And how soon would you need that money?
We need them yesterday because we've already used $115 million so far. Remember, we have 4,000 plus refugees, and the number keeps climbing because they closed the Quebec, the Roxham Road. Guess what? They're coming in Ontario. They're coming to Toronto. So you close the door in one place, they're arriving to Toronto. So the numbers are climbing up. We're turning away 250 people per night. We just have no room. So we've used up that money last month, and we have no money left, which is why the churches are full, shelters are full, everything is full. We're desperate. So we're saying, please help. And don't cap the dollar, because the more refugees arriving, we have no control. The more than we would need. If you just say, this is the amount, and not look at the numbers that are climbing, then we're always in a deficit situation. We'll always be asking, then it just doesn't work, right?
Okay, Mayor, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Toronto's Mayor Olivia Chow. Up next.